in UK government from about 2010, we set out on a significant transformation programme that saved billions of pounds. And what we wanted to do was improve public services for citizens and for businesses while saving money. Quite early on, UK government set an aim to move to cloud, to use cloud more to support its transformation strategy. Now, we didn't explicitly think too much about security at the beginning. We had what we thought was a suitable accreditation regime, and we wanted to accredit cloud as part of that transformation program. It wasn't until a few years later that we realized this approach wasn't quite working. And we were trying to use bespoke technology for something we should have just been leveraging. And one of the services that had been transformed as part of the program was a registered to vote service. And on the eve of the deadline to register to vote, there was a TV debate. And the political leaders at the end of the debate said, please go and register to vote. Please use your democratic right to vote in this referendum. So members of the British public turned off their TV and, of course, after making a cup of tea, because they're British, then went to the website to register to vote. And the website fell over. It went down. The reason it hadn't been able to scale was actually connected to security, which wouldn't necessarily be immediately obvious. And what happened was all of our cloud providers we had required to meet our own accreditation regime rather than just accepting international best practice. And this had meant that we hadn't leveraged hyperscale cloud and we'd used a smaller cloud provider that hadn't been able to scale to cope with the demand and had fallen over. So one of the lessons there, which I think is really important, was one of my first lessons when it comes to security and transformation, is leverage what works. Don't bespoke technology, recognize international best practice, international standards, and accept technology for things like cloud in the way that it's sold.
My name is Ian McCormack, and I'm the Deputy Director for the government team within the National Cyber Security Centre. My role is leading the NCSC's effort to help build the cyber resilience of government and the wider UK public sector. And one of the biggest challenges I was deeply involved with was probably the wholesale reform of how we think about security classifications. And despite the name, the work wasn't so much about the actual classification that was assigned to the document or to an object, but it was much more about reforming and changing how we approach security so that it can enable government to make much better use of contemporary technologies. For example, the notion that the threat model that much of government functions face is consistent with the use of good, well-configured commodity technology.
Some context of how UK used to approach security. So we had a data classification system that was really based in the Cold War and documents. There were 7 levels and they went from unclassified all the way up to top secret. And over time, there was a classification creep. So most of our information ended up being restricted, which meant it was particularly sensitive. In the UK, we also had a way of classifying technology. So we would assess technology and would apply impact levels to it. So we'd look at a piece of technology and what data it would be storing and say, this system needs to be rated one of the 7 business impact levels, but they're not the same as the 7 types of data classification, and often those 2 things got conflated. So to modernize our legacy approach, we did 2 things. So the first was we simplified the data classification process. We moved from 7 levels to 3, and we said for 90% of our data, our information is at the official level. The other thing we did was we removed the quite rigid approach to impact levels and measuring the impact of IT systems. And we encouraged departments and public sector organizations to take a more holistic approach to risk. Internationally recognized best standards and best practice are good enough for 90% of our information.
When you're disrupting accepted organizational norms, the change that is associated with that can be quite difficult to overcome. For example, where following compliance with established policies is paramount rather than the assessment of risk and making contextualized security decisions. It places responsibility in different places and it asks different things of people. And I've learned that the cultural changes and helping people along that transformation journey are probably the hardest challenges and also among the most critical elements. The core of our approach is about empowering and informing the right decision maker. And we've learned that successful digital services must first and foremost meet the core, functional, and user needs of the service. Otherwise, what's the point? And users trying to navigate non-functional technology to get the job done can often lead to poor security outcomes in itself. Good and effective security must support fundamental service delivery and the user need. That means that good security must be contextualized, and a one-size-fits-all approach does not work well. And the flip side to good security must support the user need is that good technology or services must be secure by design and easy to configure and maintain to be secure by default. And this is a security responsibility that must be held by those that are delivering those technology services.
So I speak to a lot of governments and public sector organisations around the world, and it's such a common problem where they think they're being secure because they have an approach to security and data classification that had worked for them in previous decades. The National Cybersecurity Centre is very open in its advice and what works. And I think we're seeing this more and more, this open approach to transforming government, even when it comes to security. And I think one thing I learned in the cybersecurity community is, like digital, it's also community, and people like to share what works and doesn't work, and that makes them stronger and more secure.
The NCSC has developed a common framework to help risk owners reason about their cloud service security needs in a common way, which can then be compared to the services that are available. We can also work with cloud vendors to help better inform consumers how their security needs can be met. We've got much more information about this overall approach to security of the cloud on our website, ncsc.gov.uk. We're uniquely positioned here in the NCSC because of our world-class expertise, and also that we are truly independent. It's that independent and authoritative voice that our partners, customers, and other public service leaders around the globe value and trust. There can sometimes be an emotional nervousness about using the cloud in addition to more technical security concerns. We need to recognise this, and one way we have tried to help people overcome this is by explaining how we chose which cloud services to use ourselves in the NCSC. And you can find some more information and blogs about this on our website.
It may seem counterintuitive that people in the security community being more open, but it encourages other people to take more secure approaches because you want to create a baseline of security. And also, because it's not a bespoke approach, you're using best practice. So you're encouraging people just to use best practice. And in this case, by using public cloud, you can actually be more secure because for many cloud companies like AWS, security is job zero, and they're taking care of things like patching and patching all the way down to the hardware level and the BIOS, and it gives you more control, gives you much more better tooling when it comes to auditing and logging, and these are all good security practices. And by sharing that and working in the open about it, you're just encouraging other people to take advantage of best security practices and tooling which are readily available. So for me, one of the key lessons is don't do everything you can't.